Okay, so to wrap up the steering fiasco. So I'm going to try and send these ball joints back because they're not what I bought. And I'm going to try and send these tie rod ends back that they sent me because they're also wrong. And so the other brand that I bought, which was, where's the box at? This brand makes a considerably better product. It's actually all made in Japan, but there is the part number. Oh, well, that's made in Taiwan. Okay, well, the ball joint said made in Japan. And maybe the made in Taiwan part is the reason that these tie rod ends didn't fit either. But, so what happened here? So these are the ones, the Mevotech ones. Problem with these. So the picture showed that this had a castle nut on it with where you can put a pin through it or a key through it. These ones are not like that, just comes with a cheap lock nut. This isn't an absolute deal breaker. It was just more irritating of the fact that this isn't the one I ordered. It wasn't the picture of the one that I bought. But actual problems with this one. So the other important lesson that I learned in this deal is until everything is completely and totally said and done, and maybe even there needs to be like a 2-year grace period, do not get rid of the original parts, because I actually threw away the original tie rod ends and ball joints to this car after, all my new parts showed up and looked, and, pretty much mostly looked the same, except for those, but whatever. Point of the matter is I threw all that away, and I actually had to go to the scrapyard and pull off one of these tie rods off of one of those cars out there to know what an original one was supposed to be. So that kind of was a bit of a pain, but it's the way it goes. So between these 3 tie rod ends, there is the whatever Beck Arnley one or whatever that brand is. So the reason this one is a problem is, so this was also a tool I used to not necessarily gauge just the depth, but gauge the depth of the threads, because I can, if you can hear that, you can feel it clicking along the threads. And so this one has threads to right there. Or actually, I need to do it on this one. So right there is where it catches on the first thread. However, that's where this one bottoms out. So that is the difference there. The hole in this one is not deep enough. There's the brand. Overbuilt for durability. That's hilarious. But yeah, so these are unusable. The only way that these could be made to work is you would have to cut the threads on the inner tie rod, because with the way this one is, with not being able to thread the inner tie rod in far enough, you can max out the adjustment and the wheels will still be towed in. You can't pull the wheels, in alignment. So that's why that is a huge bust. And I didn't do, that, cut the rod, because I did not like that this one did not have the same thread count as this one, as the original, the OEM one. So for that reason alone, those ones got tossed. Now the Beck Arnley ones, these ones had the opposite problem. They were too long. So it was actually, original length was probably on the back side of this nut, is how far it ran. And so it had the same problem where it kept the wheels towed in, even though it was under max adjustment. So this one I actually cut down, and the reason I went ahead and did that is so, again, using my little tool to count the threads. The threads on this one ran pretty much all the way down. And so I used this, and and I'd measure it, double check it with the micrometer, and I would measure up how much actual threads are in there, because you can bottom it out in the hole, pull it forward a little bit, and you can feel it catch on the first thread. And so I made sure that that distance was the same on these ones whenever I cut them. These actually should be a little bit, I cut them a little bit long just in case. I didn't want to cut them too short, basically. So these ones still actually have probably a 1/16 of an inch more thread than the original ones. I left myself a little bit of room there. I could go back and, you know, file down on it or something. But anyways, so I cut that on both of them, cut 3/8 of an inch off, and that seemed to do it because I have it maxed out right now and the wheels are actually pulled or towed out. So it doesn't need to go any further, I don't think. I mean, when the motor's in it and the suspension's all compressed, I might have to come back in and trim it, you know, take it apart and trim them a little bit shorter, but I don't think so. But yeah, so I got the castle nut on there, cotter key in it, grease zerks are in it. These just much better quality, a much better boot on there. I'm much happier with this brand. That is probably gonna be the brand that I'll end up buying for stuff on this car. And so, how did I cut those? Because, I mean, you have to kind of cut it reasonably square because that nut has to be able to jam up against it, and, you know, the more contact area you have, the more friction it'll have so that nothing comes loose. So the way I did that was this setup. And so the only thing that moves here is the table swivels, and that's it. And then I got the drill press, you know, set down. This is all sitting square in the vise, which is bolted down. And in the drill press, what I have, if I can get it out here, is actually a pipe fitting. And I believe it was just a 1/4 inch. Of course, that would fall down in there. It's just a 1/4 inch, just generic pipe thread, because they didn't have any 13mm bolts, which I'm pretty sure it's a 13mm bolt. But 1/4 inch pipe thread is pretty darn near close. So I was able to, you know, stick this up, basically use this as an adapter to get the tie rod end onto the drill press where I could keep it centered and spin it, and then just gently feed the saw into it. And I had to be real careful with it because it would try and bite and rip the saw in real quick, and if I would have let it do that, it would have just, at some point it would have broke the blade. But yeah, so just cut it real slow. And that worked pretty good. Use my, it actually looks like a thing of soda, but it's actually transmission fluid in there. Yeah, use that as a cutting oil. Alright, so straight off the drill press, I used a little rat tail file and just kind of cleaned up that very top. Well, it's not really a thread, but I just cleaned up the top of it so nothing was overhanging into the threads. And then took a flat file and just kind of cleaned it up a little bit. So, looks pretty good now. And yeah, so that worked out really good. Oh, and so the other thing that was helpful is to scribe a mark. What I did is I used, you know, caliper, measured out to where it said 3/8 of an inch, And you can actually, lock one of these down, clip the top on there, and the tips of these are super sharp, and they're made out of a pretty hard metal. So this is hard to do one hand, but you can use it to go around and scribe a mark right where you want it. You can see that shiny spot. So that way, you're not trying to you're not trying to line it up on a Sharpie mark or a pencil mark or something like that. It just helps you be a little more precise with it. But yeah, so that I think is going to be it as far as the power steering rack. What I'm going to do is, I don't know where center is as far as the steering column is, because I don't think I was smart enough to measure that up before I took it all apart, but I did put a dot on the shaft and the input shaft and on the actual housing of the power steering rack. And so all three of those dots line up. And then I took a measurement from the end of the inner tie rod to the power steering rack. So I should be able to theoretically get that measurement, line up the three dots, and kind of get it roughly back to where it was. But yeah, it's just going to take a bit of messing around with it. Basically, we'll just need to be good enough that it can drive to an alignment shop, and that's it. But anyways, so there's that deal. Because I couldn't get this part of the shaft to collapse. So I took it out, clamped it in the vise here so I don't tear up the the coupler that I can't remember the name of. And I took the air chisel right here and just kind of gently worked it down, cleaned up the splines with a rubber brush, did the best I could with the inside. And then on the underside here, which you can see it's all beat up now I should have put a piece of metal there, but I didn't think to do that. I used the tool that now I can't remember the name of that, whatever it is, pneumatic chisel, hammered it on and then just kept taking it on and off. And I got it to the point where it slides freely now. So I should be able to compress it and get it hooked up to the power steering rack. And I'm going to put some never sees on here just so if future me ever has to take this apart, this won't be as difficult. All right, I believe everything is back together. The two bolts got Loctite. The lock nuts that I had to undo to get the shaft out got Loctite on those. Put some anti-seize on the splines down here too, just because that was a huge pain to get apart the first time. But yeah, so I think we're squared away here until, the motor's in, and then get to find out if this thing leaks or not, but hopefully it won't. But anyways, so that's the end of this project.